Okay, hello everybody, and thank you so much for joining me and spending your lunch break with us. My name's Heather Gray, I'm from Bruntwood Works, and this is part of our Spark programme. And today I'm really delighted to be joined by some of my colleagues and also some of the colleagues from Unify. And we're all here to talk to you about returning to the office. Now, as you'll all know, over the weekend, the government had confirmed that the roadmap out of lockdown was looking to go ahead with all of the planned timescales, which is super positive. And it's also given everybody, I think, a few more dates and deadlines to start looking at when they're planning their own return into the new normal and whatever we can expect there. So after a year of restrictions, it's lovely to see some light at the end of the tunnel. But that shift back and that transition might come with a few worries or a few things that you might be considering at the moment, just about how to bring your teams back in. You know, a lot of you might not have been in the office for a very long time. So how do we bring people back in a safe way and in a compliant way? So the team that I've got with me today have all been looking at this from various angles within our business. We've been supporting our customers, we've been doing it ourselves as well throughout this period, you know, looking at bringing our own colleagues back and how we manage that process. So I'd love to take this opportunity to introduce everybody. If I could hand over to you and just tell me who you are, what you do, and what you'll be covering in today's session, and then we can dive right in.
Great, thanks Heather. Hi, I'm Simon Durbin and I'm the Soft Services Director for Unify, and we're responsible for primarily delivering the cleaning services to Bruntwood buildings, to a number of Bruntwood customers and also a number of external clients across the North West and Midlands. And hopefully I'll be able to share with you a few practical tips that will support you and your teams and give you the confidence to get them back into your workplace.
Hello, my name's Esther Park. I am, sorry, things just popped up. I'm head of people at Unify, so I'll be talking about how you engage with your people, how you communicate with people, make sure everyone's feeling happy and safe to come back into the office.
Amazing.
I'm Andy Weaver, Head of Operations at Bruntwood Works, so I'm in charge of looking after all of our office and retail buildings, working really closely with Rachel's team in Risk to get our buildings set up and safe for customers returning.
And hello everyone, I'm Rachel, the Head of Risk for Bruntwood. I'm fairly new to the business, so I joined at the end of November, just literally before the start of the last lockdown. So I'm really looking forward to playing a positive part in welcoming all of our customers, colleagues and communities back. So as a head of risk, I guess my role is to ensure that everybody all knows and understands and acknowledges what risks there are and how best we go about controlling them so that all of our people, places and spaces can be the best that they can be.
Amazing, thank you so much. And we've got such a great panel covering literally every angle around this process. So hopefully you guys will find this a really, really interesting, really informative lunch session. You might have just seen a poll box. This is the joys of online events, has popped up quite unexpectedly at the start, but we're really keen to see what you're all thinking about returning to the office and what you're concerned about as well. And the other thing, you know, while we do have all of this knowledge in the room virtually, we also have the opportunity to ask and respond to some of your questions as well. So you will see at the bottom there's the Q&A and there's the little chat box. Either way, pop your questions into them as they come into your head, and I will ask them to the team at the end. We've got some time reserved for questions and answering. So a question that I've got really, just from quite a nosy perspective, what are we hearing about people returning to the office? What are our customers thinking? Andy, how are people feeling?
It's a mixed bag really. So we've throughout the pandemic had around an average about 25% of our normal footfall in our buildings. So some customers have continued to work normally throughout the pandemic, where we do have others who've not returned since last March. the general kind of feeling now is that most businesses that haven't had colleagues in are starting to think about bringing people back. And we're expecting that to kind of really accelerate from next week. Even though the government messaging is still officially work from home, the kind of sentiment around it seems to be changing now. So people will have probably seen in the news around the free lateral flow tests now that anyone can get and pick up from different centres or get sent to their homes. And I think that will probably give people a little bit more confidence to start to think about, at the very least, returning to their offices. And we think by the mid-June date, which everyone's hoping comes around, and easing of restrictions completely on the 21st, that we'll be back to somewhere close to normal by that date. But it's going to be an uptick, we think, pretty much from next week is what we're expecting.
Amazing. And Esther, from a colleague perspective as well, we're bringing a lot of people back in over the next few months. Like, what's that process like, and what are people kind of feeling from a colleague perspective?
So we've been talking to people throughout, obviously, and everyone's really different. So everyone's in a very much a different place. There's loads of positives that people have experienced to lockdown. Some people are enjoying spending more time. They've got little kids at home and enjoying spending more time with them, or perhaps not enjoying spending so much time with them. But then you've also got people who are really struggling. So we've got people that we've been speaking to who are really lonely, really isolated, just desperate to get back into some kind of structure where they can feel more productive and engage with their colleagues and have that social aspect back in as well. The thing that I've heard most kind of from friends and colleagues and people that I've been speaking to and in the media as well is that people want the best of both. So people want that flexibility to be able to work from home, to be able to manage their time more independently, to go for a walk in the park or do some gardening at lunchtime or whatever suits them, but also get back and get that engagement, those relationships back with their colleagues. So most people have heard about hybrid working. It's a bit of a hot topic in the media at the moment, and I expect most businesses where they can will be doing some form of that hybrid working, where people are able to work from sometime from the office and sometime from home or from wherever suits them.
That makes perfect sense. And I guess it's a really nice opportunity at the moment for people to be thinking, what are the things that they've valued through the lockdown period? What are the things that they've really missed? And look at how do you marry the two up? And I guess as well, I think, we're doing well to start off with that conversation about how people are feeling and getting them bought into that whole process about the return. But a lot of employers are obviously quite worried about risk at the moment. Some of the customers are worrying about getting their own risk assessment wrong and that liability being on them, and it making them very nervous about any COVID related kind of damages or things like that. And that might be why some of them have been putting off the reopening of their office. I know that we've been working a lot with British Safety Council around accreditations and creating COVID secure workplaces and things. So I guess from our process of doing that within our own spaces and feedback from questions we've been handling with our customers, really, do we have any top tips of, if you are planning to return, how do you do it in a COVID compliant way? And it'd be great, Andy, if I could fire that to you, because I know you've been working a lot around this topic.
Yeah, well, I think probably the first thing to say is a lot of what the government asks from risk assessments is kind of common sense, and you'll have seen just from visiting things like supermarkets and normal daily life of what kind of things are around there, such as floor markings and social distance signage. So we were probably fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, of when the pandemic started back in March, there wasn't much government guidance. So we initially went with a common sense approach to setting up our buildings, and actually using that approach it didn't leave us a million miles away from where the government guidance landed. So I think that's probably one thing I would say. There's loads
not be too daunted by it.
Yeah, exactly, and I'm sure Rachel can probably jump in, but there's loads of help around kind of risk assessments as well on the HSE website, which links through from the government websites, and a lot of it is very much common sense. Some of the things that we did at the very beginning, which are now part of the official guidance and were picked up by the British Safety Council, are things like signage to enforce social distancing, floor markings, reduce capacity in lifts, one-way systems in buildings, keep left signs. It's as basic as that. Moving desks away from each other, to try and get that 2 meter distance between your workstations. It's fair. A lot of it is common sense, which is the good thing. It's not it's not too difficult to understand and decipher, I don't think.
Yeah, and that's really lovely to hear as well, in that, it doesn't have to be daunting, it doesn't have to be scary, and obviously we're here to ask to answer any questions and help as well. I mean, obviously we've been doing that within our own COVID safe buildings, outside of the customers' workspaces. But Simon, I know you've been supporting a lot of employers as well about how they can make their space COVID safe.
Yeah, absolutely, Heather. I think some of the advice we've been giving to people is it's really helpful if you can try and engage with some of your team and have them involved in the whole return to work project, and try and put yourself into the shoes of the team. Some of these people may well be returning after an extended absence, and you're almost reinducting them into the workplace. So some of the very simple advice we've offered is to encourage customers to walk their suites, and then start writing down a list of any areas that may cause some concern. And often these will absolutely jump off the page at you as you're wandering around, and start to just think about it a little bit more deeply. And as I say, if you can involve your team in this, you're effectively starting to build your own risk assessment. And again, sometimes some of the language around health and safety advice and risk assessment, people can find quite daunting, but I think Andy explained really well there. A lot of it is just real common sense. And if you are walking through an office area, just start to think about, are there any bottlenecks in your office where people will naturally be squeezed through it and gather, and what are you going to do about that? Are there a significant number of touch points that maybe you need to think about? Can you manage them out completely and remove them? Or do you need to start thinking about some sort of regular touch point cleaning? Things like T points, microwaves, door handles, those types of areas. And then you've got stuff where potentially social distancing may not be practical, or may need a little bit more planning. That sort of breakout area that you've got where normally 10 people may have previously sat may now only be suitable for 2 or 3 people at a time. So thinking about whether you can roster people in and out for break areas. And then one of the key bits we've absolutely talked to people about, and there's a real variance in views on this, is whether you operate a hot desking system or whether you actually decide to remain with fixed desking. And depending on different people's business and perspectives, there are some fairly different views on that. Once you've sort of got that list, and then you've started to think about how you can effectively manage out some of these challenges, just be really practical. A lot of the stuff that Andy talked about is just real practical advice. And then if you start to think of this from a cleaning and hygiene perspective, then your natural starting point is going to be to understand what your current cleaning regime is and your current specification is, and then start to look at where there are potentially any gaps in that that you may need to plug. And it's amazing, really, when we talk to customers, say, tell us about your cleaning specification, what's in place. Often people struggle to find that. So we'd absolutely encourage you to talk to your current cleaning provider so that you can have that specification, because then you'll understand where the gaps are and what needs plugging.
That makes perfect sense. And I guess whilst it has to be kind of individual to your own suite and the layout and everything, there's a lot of common things that will come up again, that we see time and time again. And Rachel, from your perspective as well, obviously you've been doing a lot of work around risk assessments and HSE guidance and everything. Is there anything that you can add?
Yeah, and just to reiterate what both Simon and Andy have said, really, this is the first time that anything like this has ever happened to any of us. So it's kind of like position yourself back in March and you're looking for that guidance that wasn't always available. So it really is a common sense approach. However, there is more and more guidance available now. So just to go back to your point about any top tips, I'd suggest to people to actually head towards the HSE website, which, predominantly that may have put people off in the past, but actually it's a really user-friendly portal that most information that you would require is easy to access. So like I say, first time anybody's ever gone through anything like this. However, we have gone through that, as you know. We do have resource, like tools available and those risk assessment templates that actually we're happy to share with you, you know, and if there's anything that you're unsure of within your own workplaces, again, just utilize us, just ask the question. We're happy to support and help. There has been a post recently on the MEN, I think it was, with regard to HSE spot checks, which some of you may have seen. And again, this is not something to worry about. These visits and these spot checks from inspectors are really proactive, actually, and they just want to help support you in your workplaces. So good tip, head to the HSE website, make sure you've briefed yourself on that, and you can kind of know what to expect.
Amazing, but it's not something to be scared of.
Absolutely, no, they are really proactive. Like I say, they'll more than likely turn up at a premises and just ask to speak to a business, and just check that, you know, that you kind of on the right track with those control measures. So everything that Andy mentioned, basically the separation of desks, use of screens, and obviously the hygiene that Simon mentioned earlier.
Amazing. Well, I mean, that's really reassuring, and I'll make sure, you know, following this event, what we will do is send out an email with the recording of this in case anybody wants to refer back to anything, but also we'll pop a few handy links and guidance on there as well. I mean, I know for the Bruntwood Works customers, one of the things that we have done is made sure that we've done risk assessments within our buildings specifically. So again, just have a look out for those, because they can kind of help give some guidance. I just had a really lovely chat actually that's come through from Clodagh Freeman at First Actuarial, and she said that there's been a spot check phone call and it wasn't at all daunting, and it was very practical and very helpful, and that's lovely. I think there's sometimes that thing where if it's almost a government official or an official body, you feel like, are they here to come and trip us up? And it's not a case. It's just making sure that people are doing things right and helping them if they've missed anything. I mean, Esther, something I'm really keen to talk to you about as well is, you know, obviously we've talked about preparing our space, but we need to prepare our teams as well. You know, it's all one thing making sure that we've gone through all of these risk assessments, everything's clean, everything's safe, but also the reassurance piece, I guess, to teams is equally as important. I mean, that whole communication around new ways of working within the office. Have you seen kind of any practical tips that people watching this might be able to take on?
Yeah, I think I mean, communication, absolutely. Like it's so important through everything that you do. And I think it's been mentioned a little bit already about guidance changing and ambiguity and not really sure what's going on. So communicating it and constantly communicating, regularly communicating, updating people with what's going on. So for us, we've got a large number of people who are operational, of course. So about 90% of our people are actually operational. So they're out working in the field. So cleaners, engineers, we've got specialist cleaners, window cleaners as well. So they're out in the field all the time, constantly working. So we've been working with them really closely, face-to-face primarily, talking about what practices we've put in place, what changes we've put in place to make sure that we're keeping them safe and keeping our customers safe. That's going to change again as offices get busier as well. So everyone's got really used to working in very quiet spaces. So as our offices get busier, we're going to have to keep talking to them again about what changes we're going to need to put in place as offices get busier and there are more people around. On the other side, we've also got our central team. So we've got a bunch of people who've been working from home primarily for up to a year. And again, it's having those conversations and that communication with them. Mostly through people managers, through their line managers, having those one-to-one conversations, what's going on with them, what can they expect, but then backed up with fairly regular, really clear, simple company-wide communications, emails to say, look, this is what's happening, this is what's changing, this is what the latest government advice is, just so you've got something really concrete that you can refer back to and have that conversation with. But it does kind of ultimately come back to those one-to-one conversations with managers and with your teams about, you know, how you're feeling, what's going on, how's this going to impact your day-to-day, so you can really understand and adapt your approaches, as Simon was saying, by involving people.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I guess as well, it's opening the doors to not only just keeping people safe and letting them know what to expect when they do come back in, but also you're getting that barometer of, like you said, how people are feeling, and you're able to address that on a very individual, personal basis, and also, I guess, spot any trends that's happening within, within the colleagues in general that might need to be addressed through wider communications.
Yeah.
Perfect. And Andy, as well, from a Bruntwood Works perspective, obviously, we've had a lot of hybrid working through this period. We were quite equipped already to look at flexibility. But how have we communicated all of those changes with colleagues? And you've been very involved in driving a lot of those messaging out.
Yeah, it's similar to what Esther said. Really, there is communication's been key. So we kind of rewrote the rule book at the beginning of the pandemic around how we communicated with the wider team. So we do online pulse surveys at least once a week, which kind of is an invite for people to answer a set of questions around how they're feeling on various topics. So that gives us a real good kind of temperature test on where we maybe need to tailor future comms around various topics where people might be a little bit more nervous. So that's been really good. We, at the beginning of the pandemic, we had a daily COVID update, which as we kind of moved forward became a weekly COVID update, which is still happening now. And that's just a really good opportunity for the senior team to communicate some of those key messages and give some of the kind of some of the feedback from those pulse surveys to say, this is what you've said and this is what we're now going to do to hopefully make people feel more at ease. And then we've done some quite interesting things around director calls, which is been an opportunity to effectively call a different senior board member at home every evening and chat about anything. And I think they've been very much open to quite a wide variety of conversations. But it's just really to try and give people really unparalleled access, I guess, to stuff that they maybe wouldn't have had chance to do before. And I guess the other one, which is probably a bit more comfortable for colleagues to do, is just a COVID update email. So, an email address, should I say. So if people have any concerns or questions, you can just, you email that email address, and that's manned by people from our people team who will then get back in with a response to that query. And that's been really helpful as well, I think, because then there's nobody kind of bottling things up and feeling that they can't ask a question that's maybe causing them some anxiety to some degree. But yeah, the key thing is very much is being open in all those communication channels, because we've seen things have just changed so quickly, often overnight, and we can send a message on a Monday and by the next day it's changed. So I don't think you can communicate too much in times like this. That's kind of been the message from us.
That makes perfect sense. And I guess as well, it's one of those where it gives people that sense of ease coming back. I remember in that funny in-between lockdown period of last year, we'd had so many communications out, so I kind of always knew what to expect when I came back in the office. And I was actually more worried about getting public transport and things. I thought, I'll be fine when I'm there, it's just getting there, and it's that sense of reassurance, I guess, that we're aiming for. I mean, Esther, we've been doing loads across Unify and across Bruntwood Works about those comms in supporting people returning back. Have you got any best practice tips as well that you might be able to share with us?
I think just being really open and really honest. I think that's something that's evolving pretty rapidly over time, that people don't expect us to have all the answers, just as long as we're being open and transparent about it and saying, look, this is what, and as Andy was just saying, we're putting some comms out on a Monday, by Tuesday it's changed. Well, just being honest about that and being really transparent. So, we've got nothing to hide. We're not trying to trick anybody. This is just where everything's at, and treating people as adults really throughout it. So we've been as open as we possibly can be. We're sharing all risk assessments, so people have got that confidence then to say, look, we're following the right process. We've looked at everything. These are the mitigations that we're putting in place to help keep everybody safe. I think, again, our most effective comms are really through people managers and having those one-to-one conversations and just gauging where people's heads are at, because everybody's going to be in a different place. We've got some people, as I said earlier on, who are desperate to get back to the office, bored out their heads at home, and we've got other people who've been working in and out the office throughout. So it's not such a significant change for them. And then we've also got colleagues who've been shielding up until a week ago. So, you know, potentially have barely left the house for a year. So they'll be feeling really uncomfortable and really nervous potentially. So it's about having those personal relationships with people directly, to be able to have those honest conversations and to really address what might be on their mind, whether it be, I'm dead excited, when can I come back and how soon can it be? Or I'm really not feeling comfortable about this, what can you do to reassure me? So that's the way to approach it.
Absolutely. And I think it's one of those where hopefully, you know, one of the positives that we can take from this really difficult year has been, you know, if we can get into a position where our businesses are feeling more open and transparent between teams and across different leadership teams and levels, then, you know, that's a really good, strong position for a business to come out of it. You know, that might be just me being overly optimistic there, but we've got to take some positives. I mean, Andy, in terms of that communication with our customers as well, because obviously we've been speaking very internally at the moment, but, you know, we've had to make sure that we've got that balance right in terms of letting customers know what to expect and how it's affected their businesses as well. Can you tell me a little bit about how we've dealt with that, and kind of as well, maybe for businesses watching this who aren't our customers, what they should be expecting from landlords as well?
Well, I think from our side, it's very similar to with colleagues. We've communicated a lot with customers. I think that's fair to say, and you know, we've probably never communicated more with our customers, I would say. So for customers on the call, you know, hopefully that's been okay, and the feedback's generally been very positive around that. But we are very conscious of the communication that we send out, and that it has to be kind of really useful information, and we're not, you know, we don't want to be bombarding customers with, you know, with fairly minor updates. So it tends to be kind of more around when there's a change in government advice, or when something's changed in the building that they might need to know about. So it's kind of been a joint effort. So we've got the commercial teams who've been speaking to customers around some of the support that they can get. So that's again been coming out in waves, and there's been some really good work done with some of our professional services team have helped some of our smaller companies fill in applications for grants and loans and things, and that level of support. And then our on-site teams have been trying to keep in touch with customers as often as possible around the physical changes in the building. So next time you come in, there might be a slightly different flow through the building. There might be a different way of using lifts, of using staircases and things like that. So it isn't that surprise when people come back into the building. So and one thing probably that's important to point out is we've obviously had to find the balance around the number of people we have in our buildings from my team's perspective, because we obviously don't want teams sat there with very few customers coming in, but equally we want to make sure when customers come back that they feel supported, and they feel that they can go to someone in the building to ask for advice. So the on-site teams have been very much hands-on, walking people around buildings and showing them if we have one-way routes, if we have reduced lift capacities and those kind of things, and really just trying to make sure people are comfortable with what's going on in the building. And the other key thing is making sure our customers know that the buildings are COVID secure, and that work with the British Safety Council was kind of key to that, to make sure that we know that some of our customers' employees will be nervous, as we know, and it's just to try and give as much reassurance that the landlord is doing as much as they can to make those buildings safe for when the customers come back in.
Yeah, so it's a real hand-holding kind of partnership approach, really. I mean, no matter what you do and how much you communicate, inevitably there are always going to be some colleagues and some people that just don't really want to come back into the office. You know, we've had a year of working in a very different way. Esther, is there anything that we can be doing to kind of support those colleagues?
Yeah, I think there's always going to be somebody. There's always going to be somebody who doesn't want to come back in the office. As you said, you know, we've become embedded in these new ways of working, and also there's lots of people with different experiences as well. So we might have somebody who's genuinely just really, really worried about their health. As you know, mentioned before, people have been potentially shielding up until a week ago. They're not necessarily going to feel as comfortable coming back in as somebody who's been in and out of the office and in and out and about town. So, but equally, you might have someone who just says, well, actually, I'm fine at home. I've been really productive. I'm happy. This really suits my life. I just don't want to come back. So what's the point? And they don't see the value. And I think that kind of two-way communication that we've been talking about is so important here. So I think it's really important to make sure that you're listening to what people's concerns are, really trying to understand where they're coming from, what that perspective is. Most people aren't just trying to be difficult, so you'll be surprised. You sometimes think that someone's just trying to be a bit awkward and they're not towing the line, but actually most people aren't just trying to be a pain. They're saying those things for a reason. So make sure you're listening and understanding those perspectives. If as a business for you, it is really important that people spend some of their time or even all of their time working in the office. I'd just make sure you take a bit of time to kind of just step back a bit, reflect, make sure you're really clear and able to articulate what those reasons are. Because just saying, well, that's where your place of work is, I think isn't really going to wash nowadays. There's been so much in the media, there's been so much talk amongst friends and colleagues, and and people won't necessarily want to work for that kind of employer. So but that said, there may well be lots of really genuine reasons why it's important for people to come back in. So just take a bit of time, take a step back and think, why is this really important to us that people are in? Why is it important to our culture? Why is it important to our productivity? And then you can have that open conversation with people about it. And then, as Simon was saying earlier on, involve people in that conversation. Say, look, this is my point of view, this is my perspective, this is why I think it's important that you're in. I realise you've got some concerns or some reservations. Let's talk about it and let's try and share some ideas. Because you don't know what that person's going to come up with. They might have something, some fantastic idea of overcoming it that you hadn't potentially thought of. So it's just worth being open-minded about that.
And have you seen much of a trend as well around hybrid working and, colleagues looking at that as more of a, or employers looking at that as more?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I said earlier about kind of best of both worlds, and you said as well, Heather, the things that have come out of this pandemic that are some really positive things as well. We want to make sure we don't throw those away. I want to make sure we keep hold of those. I work in HR, so I'm big on the CIPD. So there's a CIPD report recently, and it was saying a few numbers in a row, but 40% of businesses are going to have at least half of their workforce. 40% of businesses are going to have at least half of their workforce working from home at least some of the time. So there'll be some businesses where that's just not practical because you can't work from home, but huge numbers of people are going to be spending time working away from the office. So there's going to be a real increase in hybrid working. So people working from the office some of the time and elsewhere some of the other time. And again, I'd say if you do decide to go ahead with that model, involve your teams in figuring out how that's going to work, because most of us haven't done it before. We've kind of done it a bit, we've dabbled with it, but we haven't found that perfect way of making it work. And there's going to be a bit of trial and error in that. What's going to work best for you? Do we always have our team meetings in person, or do we always have them virtually? Just figuring that stuff out and involving your people in those conversations. I think one thing that's really, really interesting as well about that model of people working from home or in the office is most people that I've been speaking to only want to go in the office if their colleagues are going to be there. So I'm not going to go on I'm not going to want to go and sit in the office and sit on my own and sit at my desk and do my emails, because I can do that from anywhere. I want to be there to see other people. And that only works if everybody's there. So everybody has to be up for that. And one of the things that I've been reflecting on quite a bit over the last couple of months really is making sure that we're building time in the office where people can just be with their colleagues. There's a lot of talk about collaboration and meetings and projects and all that kind of stuff, getting people together for really focused activities. But I think it's really important to make sure that we create time for people and space for people to just be and coexist, because that's when you get the really valuable stuff around. You sat next to your colleague, they're on the phone, they look really sad when they come off the phone, you go, oh my God, are you okay? Or someone looks really excited because they've just come back from a meeting, they're really, they're really, really pleased about something. Oh wow, what's happened? And you can't do that if you're not together. And you equally can't do that if you're just in back-to-back meetings all the time. So it's creating that space for just to coexist as a team, as an organisation together, I think is really important to remember.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's also that opportunity to kind of know what's going on in business as well, what's happening in different teams, different departments. I know that's something I've really missed. I mean, Andy, I know you mentioned before we flexed a lot of our approaches as well. I mean, how do you see things going over the next few months? Is that flexibility going to keep up? And have there been anything that you've seen that can be applied in other businesses?
I think ultimately, as Esther said, it will carry on to some degree. You know, hybrid working will absolutely have a place, you know, to play in Bruntwood's future, I'm sure. Similar to Unify in the fact that we have around half of our workforce are operational as well and work in buildings, so they don't really have the option to work remotely or flexibly. But so one thing we've been doing with those, with that group, is trying to look at things like working patterns. So where people don't have that option to work from home, it's starting at different times, you know, missing those rush hours and those peaks in public transport usage. You know, I know Manchester in particular, you know, it just doesn't have the capacity currently on public transport because of social distancing to get, if everyone was to return tomorrow, they wouldn't be able to get in because there isn't the capacity on public transport still at the moment. So it's working with your teams around those kind of things. So the operational teams, it's making sure they're as comfortable as they can be. And we're working on an individual basis to make sure people are happy coming into the workplace. And then for the office colleagues, it's very similar to everything Esther said there, really, around, you know, you've just got to have that realisation that not everyone will have a big home to work in. You know, we have loads of colleagues who are in studio apartments in Manchester city centre as an example. So for those guys, working from home is a nightmare, you know, potentially. And I think it's just understanding every single person's individual needs. I think what's going to be quite interesting for us over the next few months is where we do have that mix of people in the office and working from home, and I think that's going to be really an interesting time around. You know, if you have a meeting and some people are in the room and some are dialing in via Zoom or one of the other platforms, is how that works. And we've been trialing tech on that during the pandemic to see if we can get something that is as good as everyone being in a meeting, and ultimately we probably haven't really landed on that at the moment. So I think that will definitely be an interesting dynamic in the next few months. And people have probably heard or read in the news about some of the big tech companies in the US have kind of come out over the last couple of weeks to almost backtrack a little bit on remote working, to say that they've realised that, you know, they have a much more productive workforce if they are working in their office. And I think they've kind of come out and used the word office-centric cultures. I think that was Google's actual phrase that they used. So, and I think if people like Google can't land on tech that works as well as being face-to-face, then probably no one is going to. So
yeah, that's a good point.
I think that's really interesting to know. But yeah, I think Bruntwood Works in particular, we know we work a lot better when we are in the same physical space, and that's exactly what Esther said there around the collaboration, the coffee machine conversations, those interactions with people, and the quick 5 minutes over the desk to discuss something seems to just get things done so much better. And I think that's something that we will move more towards as people get more comfortable, you know, hopefully post that June date when social distancing restrictions ease even more as well. Yeah, and I just saw, I don't know if I saw something pop up there around people coming back to work that have not been in for a while, and I think that's one thing we've done as well is we do have a bit of a process for somebody that's come back into the office and you know maybe hasn't been in. We do have team members who've not been in for 6 months or so, and it's kind of that. It's making sure that there is a flexibility around what that looks like and a bit of hand holding, either maybe coming back part-time initially or maybe coming back on different hours to what they would normally be asked to do. So, but yeah, I just thought I'd add that because I saw it pop up just before I started talking. So.
No, that's brilliant, thank you. And obviously you've both spoken there about this open collaborative communication style, and you know we've mentioned before how important that is for the landlords and the customers that are based in those buildings, you know, to have as well as just internally within their colleagues. But you know, what can a customer or what should a customer really be expecting from their landlord through this pandemic? Simon, I'm just going to pass this over to you to start with, if that's all right.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I think it's been a really difficult time for landlords in general and in general businesses. Really fluid, and certainly with the varying lockdown, unlockdown, re-lockdown. I think we're on lockdown 3 coming to an end.
I'm losing track.
And we've got sort of 2 very different experiences of this. So one experience is landlords such as Bruntwood have absolutely chosen to enhance cleaning and hygiene measures, to provide reassurance to those customers who need to access buildings. And again, you know, there are a number of buildings where working from home just doesn't work, and so those customers have been in all the way throughout. What they have looked to do though is to try and ensure that it's productive cleaning and that we really target the areas that are required, such as touch point cleaning, as we talked about before. And then on the flip side, what we've also seen in some landlord space that we maintain is they've made a decision to sort of reduce services significantly in order to try and protect customers from significant cost burdens. And there's this real balance that plays out for landlords, and it's a very difficult one, between ensuring buildings are clean, hygienic, safe places and are available for customers, whilst also balancing that cost impact to service charge, which ultimately, you know, customers within buildings sort of are liable for and end up paying. So from our perspective, it's absolutely worth checking in with your landlord to ensure you know exactly what approach they are taking, and you're aware of any building services or areas that may have been suspended or reduced or reallocated. So again, we've seen in some premises lounge areas suspended or meeting rooms suspended, and cleaning teams then redeployed elsewhere. And from a customer perspective, we've seen a very similar theme. So across our office-based customers, we've had a number of customers who have either completely suspended the service with us, reduced service levels, and then equally we've had some where they've been occupying space, significantly increasing services to provide that real reassurance to their employees.
Perfect. And Rachel, from a kind of a compliance perspective as well, are there things that landlords should have been doing as well for customers that maybe need to just keep their eye out and make sure that they've been done?
There are other risks as well, you know, as well as COVID. So it's really worthwhile finding out what you are responsible for within your demise, and then just touching on basics with your landlord, such as Legionella, you know, if the fire alarm, fire point inspections and access and egress, and all of those other types of things too. Again, I keep signposting everybody here to the HSE website, but it does contain really useful information on air conditioning, Legionella, you know, if you ran your taps and all of those types of things too. It's just important to just think out of that box as well. So just step out of COVID for a second and look at your building as a whole. So right back to the original exercise that we said about walking your buildings, and always keep that communication up with your landlord.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think as well, I've just had a little look through the poll that we've been running, which is really lovely. Anybody that's not voted yet, please do at the bottom, because this is really useful for us to see, but also for you to be able to see kind of what other businesses in your position are thinking as well. But the biggest concern, out and out 79% about bringing the team back, is keeping them safe. You know, and it's great to see that a lot of employers are taking that so seriously. And I guess the next point of this is, where do responsibilities sit? Because I think in a lot of larger buildings that maybe have multiple offices within them and some communal space, it can sometimes feel a little bit like there's some unclarity between what the landlord is responsible for, what the customer is responsible for, whether that's communal space or in their suites directly as well. So Andy, landlord obligations, what do we need to be doing? And then Simon, I'm going to come back straight on to you, because I'm conscious we've only got 10 minutes, where the tenants need to really work with us on to make sure that together we can all stay safe and stick to the rules.
Yeah, the simplest explanation is anything in the common parts of the building. So from reception up to your suite door is the landlord's responsibility. The only thing I'd say that falls outside of that is probably your employee behaviour and following of rules. But the physical stuff is the landlord. So the communication with your landlord is key. And make sure your landlord knows your plan if you're changing ways in and out of suites and things like that. That's the easiest way to explain it, I would say.
Yeah, that makes sense. So where the building's boundaries almost lie. Yeah. And Simon, how about you then? Within that responsibilities, you know, what what do customers need to be thinking about?
I think linked to Andy, much as there is a physical demarcation of space in terms of responsibility, I think one thing in multi-tenanted buildings is thinking about effectively we're all living and sharing an ecosystem with many others. And I think often you read in the press about none of us are safe until all of us are safe in the sort of realms of vaccinations. And I think if we can plant that into our minds and into the minds of our employees, it probably just helps with some of the behaviour stuff.
Yeah.
In the current pandemic, really, we all have this responsibility just to be really mindful about our actions and how the space we are in is shared, whether we're passing through a lift space, whether we're passing through a common area, a lounge, a shower, etc. There are that many touch points that building users can share, cross over, and come into contact with each other. That just that sort of, it sounds really basic, but that common courtesy of our behaviour is really critical.
Yeah.
And then purely from a sort of cleaning and hygiene perspective, in the ideal world, what we would want is the hygiene standards within the common areas being equal to or greater than those in the office areas, so that we don't have this disparity. Because as we've seen with the virus, then it very quickly can spiral, unfortunately. And this can be really challenging in practice, but it is achievable just with some basic common sense.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And in terms of, I guess, as well, the ways that that customers can be making amendments to their own suites as well, Simon, just while I've got you, when they might be thinking about within their own spaces, how do we keep our team safe? Are there any common things that you are advising customers on again and again that should just be the basic checklist?
Yeah, I think if we go back to that walk in the building and having your risk assessment, that'll help to define some of those touch points and bottlenecks, or those areas where maybe social distancing could be difficult. And I think people often think there's going to be this huge cost involved with hygiene, and there are some really simple, easy ways to support your cleaning by adding additional cleaning in, or even potentially introducing an element of self-clean. So as an example, in our office, we've introduced cleaning stations on every bank of desks, which are very simple: paper tissue, virucidal cleaner, hand sanitizer, and we encourage our team, once they've used the desk or in a meeting room or a kitchen space, just to take ownership and wipe it down. And we've really found that that's really started to breed a sense of ownership of our sort of combined safety. In terms of sort of some simple no-cost ways to assist, then maybe have a think about, can you reallocate some of your existing cleaning hours? So speak to your supplier. We've seen lots of people talk to us about we need to get additional touch point cleaning in, but we just don't have the budget. Well, speak to your supplier and maybe see if they can get really creative with how they provide the service to you. Simple stuff, team members in your business loading dishwashers. I know in the industry we're in, I think people often think that the sink is a sort of a magic pond of fairies.
They just appear clean again in the cupboard.
Yeah, we'll move to the dishwasher and clean itself. And realistically, if your cleaner is having to deal with that, they are not doing cleaning. And so something as simple as self-loading a dishwasher, propping internal doors open, you can reduce the number of touch points where possible, so that you're not having to constantly go around cleaning them. And then things such as, again, very basic, but clear desk policies. Again, if every desk has things just pushed to one side, it enables the cleaning teams to come in and to sort of sanitize and disinfect those areas effectively. And just with a really planned and pragmatic approach to how your sort of suite operates, combined with a good quality day clean, that should be sufficient. And again, I know it sounds like we're sponsored by the HSE website, but there is some fantastic specific advice on cleaning workspaces, which is on the HSE website, which I'd urge people to read through.
No, that's absolutely brilliant, and I think it's just some really good pointers. And whilst a lot of the things feel very basic, you've got to think that people are going to be going through this information overload process at the moment, where they're worried about so many components about bringing teams back, that there are things that can be quite easy to miss. I mean, Rachel, from a risk assessment perspective, is that something that we might be able to help with as well? Not to put you on the spot.
Yeah, absolutely. we've been through that, and we are in the process of reassessing all of our workspaces. So from what it looked like back in March, it could be completely different now. So yeah, absolutely utilise some of our tools and resources that we've got available. It basically is a case of common sense. Again, I know we keep going back to that, but it really does not need to be daunting. And actually, the best thing that you can do is just understand what your hazards are, where they can come from, and what control measures you can put in place on those. There is obviously some legislation that surrounds that. The Health and Safety at Work Act is obviously the overarching piece, which just requires you to have that risk assessment and the consultation with the workforce. So all of those things that we've already discussed. But yeah, absolutely, we've got that available. I'm more than happy to help you and share that with you.
Oh, amazing. And Andy as well, I've thrown Rachel under the bus there as well, but I might as well throw you under as well. You know, is there any additional support that we can be giving, or, you know, any ways that we might be able to help customers if they ask us about it?
I think really probably utilising the on-site team. I think that's probably probably quite a big difference with us and a lot of landlords, is that we have the on-site teams use them. You know, they've been living through this, most of them, for the last 12 months, and they've got some really good practical advice if needs be. And they can always refer you on to the risk team or to Unify for cleaning advice as well. So that would be my main thing, I would say. Yeah.
No, that's fabulous. And I know there's a lot of resources as well that you mentioned before about return to work guides and things like that we can bring in.
Yes, yeah, we have that on our website. Yeah, so we've got our own return to work guide on the Bruntwood website, which people can access, and it carries through a lot of the HSE guidance, just in probably a more simplified format, I suppose. But the HSE stuff is quite easy to follow, as Rachel said.
Are there any questions, Andy, that you're getting again and again from customers?
Not particularly. It's probably more around it's probably the basic stuff that we've already talked around, really, around, you know, social distancing, cleaning regimes and those kind of things. But I wouldn't say there's any one particular question that we're getting. It just seems to be quite general at the moment, and we're just making sure from the on-site teams or whoever's fielding those questions, we're routing them through the right people, really, to make sure you're getting the best advice that you can get from us.
That's brilliant, because I know that with all of the government guidance that has kind of changed throughout this whole process, you know, there's some things like, you know, we've still got signage around for 2 meters when, you know, it might be 1 meter of social distancing. I mean, is there anything that customers need to be aware of if they're seeing those signs for the first time?
Well, we have our it's pretty much 2 meters throughout the buildings is what we've gone with, because the 1 meter plus kind of additional kind of mitigation is the rule. So our signage is all pretty much geared for 2 meters around the buildings. The only real exception, or the main exception to that, will be in lifts, where we have reduced capacities but follow the HSE guidance around, you know, when you first get back into a lift with someone, when you come back in, it's bizarre because you'll probably stand back to back with them. So it does feel very antisocial, but avoid conversations with the customers on the floor above. So things like that really are what you're most likely to see.
That's brilliant, and it's good to know and good to be aware of that, because, you know, you can put in all of these additional safety procedures in place. But for one, you need to understand why they're there, and, you know, that all makes a lot of sense. But then also, you know, it's one thing having a one-way system, but if people aren't actually using it, you know, again, there's that element of risk and liability there. I mean, Esther, I think one of the biggest challenges that a lot of customers have seen, and, you know, a lot that any organisation has seen, would be maybe about sticking to kind of behavioural rules or things like that around the pandemic. Is there any advice that you can give about kind of communications to affect just that compliance and that behavioural element?
I think it's interesting because our world has changed, hasn't it? So we're very used to now, if you're in a shop, put your face mask on. If you leave the house, without your face mask on. But, you know, you're used to having a bigger distance from people. So I think what we found in general, if you're really clear about what the steps that you've taken, the steps that you've put in place, You've got clear signs up, you've sent an email out, a couple of emails out, people know what's expected of them. As Simon said earlier, if you've got a spray at the end of your desk and you've got some paper towels, it's easy to follow. And I think in general, what we found is people have been really happy to comply because they get it, they're used to it, it's just normal now. I think the biggest challenge that we've got is maintaining that. So once somebody's first in the office, they're dead good and they're really following all the rules and really cautious and really nervous. And then once they've been in the office 3 or 4 times, it starts to get a bit more relaxed and they start peering around the perspex screens and they start getting a bit too close to people. And it's that complacency that I think is one of the biggest risks, because it just becomes a bit normalized. So I think we've just got to make sure that we keep reinforcing that messaging and reinforcing the reasons why we're doing it. It feels like we're almost there, we're almost out of it, so let's just keep it up this little bit longer. And I think equally we've got, as we said before, we've got people who are having very different experiences. So some people super chill, super relaxed, they've had the vaccine, they think they're fine, and then we've got other people who perhaps are freaking out and really uncomfortable. So it's that kind of courtesy, as Simon was saying, just being really conscious of other people and just looking out for each other, really, and just reinforcing that we've got that shared responsibility for one another.
That's brilliant, thank you. And in the absolute worst case scenario, because we've got to plan for these things in advance, what does happen if we have a confirmed case of COVID-19 in the office?
That's me.
Yes. Well, I've got you.
We've had a few cases, so it does happen. There've been cases across the world. So of course, there's going to be cases with people, with our employees, and I'd expect people on the call will have had cases as well. We've got quite a smooth process in place now. So to make sure that we're minimising the impact, so all of our operational teams, we'll work in bubbles, so we're minimising the impact of people who are potentially at risk, and also potentially have to isolate as well. We work really closely with Bruntwood, so we're following Bruntwood's track and trace process around colleagues who following up with if we've got a suspected case, so we're really quick on that. So if we've got a suspected case, quick, get on the phone to anybody who's been identified as a contact needs to isolate. To be fair, there's been far less impact than we were anticipating. Actually, we were quite worried about it 12 months ago. We haven't had that significant impact, and particularly with the office-based teams, because everyone's so used to working at home now, it's not actually been that big a deal. So I think, yeah, prepare for it. Absolutely, you've got to be prepared, and you've got to have that process in place to talk to people and ask them to isolate if they need to. But don't worry about it. It's just going to be one of those things that we're going to have to get used to.
I mean, what are the sorts of things that people need to be thinking about if there is a confirmed case, Simon? Are there any kind of hygiene perspectives that people need to just be kind of questioning when they're thinking about that risk and impact in a positive COVID-19 situation?
Yeah, I think with the sort of the best will in the world, we will see confirmed cases in buildings. And, we have experienced and dealt with confirmed cases in a number of buildings. But that said, I think we need to try and sort of take some of the fear out of it. And certainly, if I think back to April and May last year, there was this real fear around it. They can be dealt with very efficiently with minimal customer impact on most occasions. I mean, there's some key questions that we need to understand so we can then work out what sort of hygiene regime is going to be required. Was somebody simply passing through an area? Was there a significant dwell time? Have they come into contact with other people? What route have they taken through a building? What areas have they been in? And more importantly, I guess the most one is, when was the last time they were there? Yeah. And when we can piece this information together, we can then advise customers on, what is the best way forward. And in some cases it may be, it's just an enhanced touch point cleaning that is required if somebody's literally walked through a space. Equally, if somebody has spent 8 hours sat at a desk, and has been in every single touch point in the office, then something like a fogging and a sort of sanitisation and disinfection regime may be more appropriate. But the critical bit to understand is that sort of dwell time, where people have been, because then we can help diagnose it and give a good a suggestion for a way forward.
That makes perfect sense. And I guess it's almost like playing COVID detective to some extent, retrace the steps and where did they come from and where did they go. I mean, hopefully with the government kind of giving businesses access to pre-COVID testing, there should be less fear of that. you know, Andy, I know you've been having a look at our lateral flow testing kits and how businesses can work on that.
Yeah, we were initially planning on doing colleague testing in our buildings, but as people have probably seen, the government have been playing catch up a little bit, and as of tomorrow, anybody pretty much can access lateral flow tests from either picking them up from designated centres or having them delivered to their home addresses. Businesses can also apply for them as well, so that application finishes next week. So if you've got more than 10 employees, you can apply to have them delivered directly to your workplace. And then there's also a lot of local council-run walk-in centres now. There's a couple near our head office where you just walk in if you're asymptomatic, so not if you've got any symptoms, and basically just have a lateral flow test with a result in 30 minutes. So that will really reduce, I think, it will definitely reduce the number of cases where you get in buildings, because people should be self-testing a couple of times a week.
Amazing. Well, that's really positive, and I think a really, really practical step forward. I mean, just before we wrap up, I mean, 76% of our viewers are still saying keeping the team safe is their absolute main priority, a main concern when bringing people back. So just to sum everything up as we bring it to a close, what are your very quick top tips of what people need to take away from this session about making their team feel safe? Simon, I'm going to come to you.
I knew you were going to pounce on me then, Heather. I think for me, whatever you do, make it highly visible, because ultimately what we're trying to do is reassure people. So whether that is additional cleaning, a big pile of self-cleaning products, moving cleaning hours into the daytime, closing off areas, just be highly visible with it so your team can see what you have done and what precautions you put in place.
Amazing. And as we said before, communication is super important. And also just come to us if you need any help. You know, we have a team of experts who are literally dealing with every possible query about the return to the office that you can possibly imagine from every business. So whether it's guidance around HSE and legal obligations, how best to, you know, communicate with your teams, how best to clean your spaces, or just kind of what to expect with your buildings when you return. Come to us, we're here to help, and that's really, really important. Now, if there's anything that we haven't covered today, I will be sending out an email a little bit later on today, just with this recording, with some guidance and some top tips, but also I'm here on the other end of it, and I can pass any queries back to the team. So do feel free just to hit reply and tell me whatever is on your mind. That would be fantastic. If you have any more in-depth or specific questions around your own suite and around keeping that hygienic and keeping it safe, I've roped poor Simon into being one of our Spark advisors for this week. So it means that virtually you can just get together over a coffee. You've got up to half an hour of his time to ask him whatever you want, whether that's about best hygiene practice standards or just what he's been watching on Netflix. I'm sure he'll be happy to answer that as well. But yeah, please do keep in contact with us. We're putting out so much content as well at the moment, because we're really aware that this is such a pivotal time for businesses, and you've got so much on your mind as well about when we're all being re-released back into the wide world. So please do check out bruntwood.co.uk/spark, and all of our content, whether that's webinars, advisory sessions, anything like that, will all be on there, and it's being updated on a pretty much daily basis at the moment. So thank you so much everybody for joining us. Really appreciate your time, and we're really looking forward to welcoming you back into the office when it's safe and when we're able to do so. So thank you very much. Bye everyone.
Thanks.